6 December 2021. This would be without prejudice to the right of member states to submit separate credentials with respect to the 11th emergency special session and would not set a precedent for future sessions. I hear no objection. May I take it that it is the wish of the Assembly to accept the credentials approved for the 76th regular session for the purpose of the 11th emergency special session on an exceptional basis and without setting a precedent. It is so decided. We now turn to the adoption of the agenda. The provisional agenda of the 11th emergency special session is contained in document A/ES-11/2. May I take it that the Assembly wishes to adopt the agenda as it appears in document A/ES-11/2. It is so decided. The Assembly will now consider agenda item 5 entitled Letter dated 28 February 2014 from the Permanent Representative of Ukraine to the United Nations addressed to the President of the Security Council, document S/2014/136. I will now deliver my remarks from the rostrum. His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. We are all gravely concerned about the fast deteriorating situation and ongoing military action in Ukraine. As I emphasized last week, the military offensive by the Russian Federation is a violation of the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine and is inconsistent with the Charter of the United Nations. Today, I renew my call for an immediate ceasefire, for all parties to exercise maximum restraint, and for a full return to diplomacy and dialogue. The convening of this 11th emergency special session of the General Assembly, rooted in the Charter and mandated in Resolution 377A5, entitled Uniting for Peace, is a new opportunity to ensure that the leadership of the United Nations is up to the expectation of the people we serve on matters related to peace and security. It is imperative that we act on behalf of the women, children, and men caught in the crossfire. It is imperative that we pursue all available channels to contain the situation, to de-escalate tension, and to seek peaceful resolution in accordance with international law and the principles of the United Nations Charter. I welcome the announcement by the Secretary General on Friday that 20 million from the Central Emergency Response Fund will be allocated to the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine. The humanitarian consequences on civilian population, in particular women, children, the elderly, and other vulnerable groups, will be devastating. The mass exodus of refugees, including foreign nationals, numbering over 500,000 from Ukraine, to the eastern edge of the European Union has showed no signs of stopping. Checkpoints at the borders of Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, Romania, and the non-EU members Moldova have turned into choke points. I encourage member states to support humanitarian initiatives as they become available. My dear friends, there are no winners in war, but countless lives are torn apart. To that effect, security and access for humanitarian efforts must be guaranteed. Excellencies, the United Nations Charter, drafted so soon after the Second World War, is based on the principle of sovereign equality. It outlines a world where member states settle their international disputes by peaceful means without the threat or use of force. The ongoing military offensive is inconsistent with this. It is an affront to the founders of this organization and everything it stands for. The violence must stop. Humanitarian law and international humanitarian law must be respected, and diplomacy and dialogue must prevail. Excellencies, my dear colleagues, in April 1946, the League of Nations dissolved, and in 26 years of the existence of an organization which ultimately had proven incapable of preventing the outbreak of the most destructive war in human history, it was the League's failure to provide a mechanism for the enforcement of the international collective security that exposed its most fatal flaws. The Right Honourable Viscount Robert Cecil, one of the original architects behind the League of Nations, in his final eulogy to the League said, "The League is dead. Long live the United Nations." We are now in the 76th year of the existence of the United Nations. Let us remind ourselves that we founded the United Nations to maintain international peace and security, and to that end, to take effective collective measures for the prevention and removal of threats to peace, and to bring about by peaceful means and in conformity with the principles of justice and international law, adjustments or settlements of international disputes or situations. Yesterday, a rare window of opportunity opened up for dialogue. As we convene here in the General Assembly, negotiators from both sides are holding talks in Belarus. This offers a ray of hope. We pray that these talks will calm down tempers and pave way to peace. Excellencies, dear colleagues, the General Assembly, with its 193 member states, represents the collective conscience of humanity. The strength of this assembly is rooted in its moral authority. Let us demonstrate that moral courage and use today's debate not to whip up rhetoric, not to whip up war rhetoric, but to give peace a chance. Let us ignite the fire of love, humanity, compassion, and hope. Guns are better off when noted. Let peace prevail. I thank you. I now give the floor to the Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Antonio Guterres.
Mr. President of the General Assembly, Excellencies, the fighting in Ukraine must stop. It's raging across the country from air, land, and sea. It must stop now. Russian missile and air bombardments have been pounding Ukrainian cities day and night. The capital, Kyiv, is encircled from all sides. In the face of the continuing attacks, Kyiv's 3 million residents are being forced to seek safety in their homes, improvised bomb shelters, and the city's subways. The Ukrainian government has distributed a meaningful number of arms to the population with the stated objective to participate in the defense of the country. According to UNHCR, 500,000 Ukrainians have fled across the country's borders. Although Russian strikes are reportedly largely targeting Ukrainian military facilities, we have credible accounts of residential buildings, critical civilian infrastructure, and other non-military targets sustaining heavy damage. This escalating violence, which is resulting in civilian deaths, including children, is totally unacceptable. Enough is enough. Soldiers need to move back to their barracks, and leaders need to move to peace. Civilians must be protected. International humanitarian and human rights law must be upheld. The sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders must be respected in line with General Assembly resolutions. Mr. President, we are facing a tragedy for Ukraine, but also a major regional crisis with potentially disastrous implications for us all. Yesterday, Russian nuclear forces were put on high alert. This is a chilling development. The mere idea of a nuclear conflict is simply inconceivable. Nothing can justify the use of nuclear weapons. Mr. President, we face what could easily become Europe's worst humanitarian and refugee crisis in decades, with the numbers of refugees and internally displaced multiplying by the minute. I am grateful for the compassion, generosity and solidarity of Ukraine's neighbors who are taking in those seeking safety. It is important that this solidarity is extended without any discrimination based on race, religion or ethnicity. The neighboring countries will need all our support in the days and weeks to come. The United Nations will continue to assist with these efforts. Mr. President, on Saturday, I spoke with President Zelensky and assured him that the United Nations would not abandon the Ukrainian people and conveyed our determination to enhance humanitarian assistance. Even before the events of the past week, the UN was providing some 3 million people on both sides of the contact line with humanitarian assistance. The United Nations is now working 24/7 to access humanitarian needs and scale up the delivery of life-saving support to many more people desperate for protection and shelter, particularly women and children, elderly people, and those with disabilities. We are fully committed to staying and delivering for everyone affected by this deadly conflict across the country. Some of our personnel are expanding existing programs, and others are preparing new operations to get help to those who need it fast. I want to highlight 3 concrete actions. First, I've allocated $20 million from the Central Emergency Response Fund to support emergency operations along the contact line in the eastern oblasts of Donetsk and Luhansk and in other parts of the country. These will allow us to help more vulnerable people get the basics, shelter, food, water and health care as soon as possible. Second, I have appointed Amin Awad as the UN Crisis Coordinator for Ukraine. He will liaise with the government and with all relevant actors on the ground, supported by the resident and humanitarian coordinator and the UN country team. At the same time, we are bringing together partners in and outside the country and surging personnel into the country. Third, tomorrow we will launch 2 coordinated emergency appeals for Ukraine and the region. One that addresses escalating humanitarian needs inside the country, including rising internal displacement, and another that responds to the needs of people crossing international borders to seek refuge in countries neighboring Ukraine. As we ramp up our efforts, it is essential that the safety and security of UN and associated personnel in Ukraine are protected in accordance with international law, and that humanitarian access to vulnerable people and communities is guaranteed. I call on all sides to uphold their obligations to allow freedom of movement of humanitarian personnel and to facilitate safe, rapid and unimpeded passage of humanitarian relief. I also urge the international community to mobilize in support of our funding appeals to address the needs of all those displaced by this crisis, as well as other vulnerable groups whose numbers will only grow as the fighting escalates. Mr. President, humanitarian aid is vital, but it is not a solution. It is simply treating the worst impacts of the conflict. The only true solution is peace. The attack on Ukraine challenges international law and the multilateral system rooted in the UN Charter. Some of the possible consequences of a worsening conflict are terrifying to contemplate. Regional tensions are rising. The latest security measures underline the high stakes for all. The economic repercussions of the crisis will have widespread impact, and I count on every member state to live up to the principles of the Charter. Mr. President, the guns are talking now, but the path of dialogue must always remain open. It's never too late to engage in good faith negotiations and to address all issues peacefully. I hope that the direct talks now taking place between Ukrainian and Russian delegations will produce not only an immediate halt to the fighting, but also a path towards a diplomatic solution. I welcome and encourage all peaceful efforts to end the bloodshed and halt this conflict. I thank the countries who have offered to host and facilitate negotiations. The United Nations is ready to support such efforts. Mr. President, war is not the answer. It is death, human suffering, senseless destruction, and an immense distraction from the real challenges facing humanity. The climate crisis and biodiversity loss, vitally needed socio-economic recovery from the pandemic, healing the divides of race and gender, and so many other pressing 21st century challenges. Humanity cannot afford to be locked in a mindset that dredges up the worst of past centuries. We need to look forward as United Nations to overcome the scourge of war. We need to focus on solving problems, not making them worse. In cities around the world, people are taking to the streets and demanding an end to war. People in Ukraine want and need peace, and I believe people in the Russian Federation do too. We need peace now. Thank you.
I thank the Secretary General for his statement. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Ukraine.
Mr. President, Secretary General, for the first time since the United Nations was born, there is a full-fledged war in the center of Europe. Everyone in this hall and everyone in the world knows that Russia, and Russia alone, started this invasion now facilitated by Belarus. This war was not provoked. It was chosen by someone who is right now sitting in the bunker. We know what happened with the person who sat in the bunker in Berlin in May 1945. Before I continue with my formal statement, I would like to switch to Russian and invite you to put on the headphones, because I would like to read from the screenshot of the smartphone of a killed Russian soldier. That's an actual screenshot from someone who is dead already. Лёш,
Alyosha,
ты как? Почему
How are
так
you
долго
doing?
не отвечаешь?
why has it been so long since you responded?
Вы точно на учениях?
Are you really in training exercises?
Спрашивает мать убитого солдата.
Asks the mother of the killed soldier
Моменты перед тем, как он был
moments
убит.
before he was killed.
Мама, я уже не в Крыму,
Mom, I'm no longer in Crimea.
не на учениях.
I'm not in training sessions.
А где?
Where are you then?
Папа спрашивает, можно ли
Papa is
тебе
asking
послать
whether I can send
посылку.
you a parcel.
Так какую посылку,
What kind
мама?
of a parcel, Mama, can you send me?
Что ты говоришь такое?
What are you
Что
talking
случилось?
about? What happened?
Мама, я на
Mama,
Украине.
I'm in Ukraine.
Тут настоящая
There
война.
is a real war raging
Мне
here.
страшно.
I'm afraid.
Мы бьем по всем городам.
We are bombing
Подряд.
all of the
Даже
cities
по мирным
together, even targeting civilians.
Нам сказали, что они
We
нас
were
будут
told
приветствовать.
that they would welcome us.
А они кидаются под нашу
And
технику.
they are falling under
И не
our
дают
armored
проехать.
vehicles, throwing themselves under the wheels and not allowing us to
Называют нас
pass.
фашистами.
They call us fascists.
Мама, мне очень тяжело.
Mama, this is so
In several
hard.
moments he was killed.
And this was several moments before he was killed.
Imagine, if you want to just visualize the magnitude of the tragedy. You have to imagine next to you, next to every nameplate of every single country in this General Assembly, more than 30 souls of killed Russian soldiers already. Next to every name of every single country in this assembly. 30 plus killed Russian soldiers. Hundreds of killed Ukrainians. Dozens of killed children. And it goes on and on and on. So just imagine those killed people next to you when you will listen to my formal statement. Big militarized power seeking for geopolitical greatness has launched a full-fledged military offensive against a smaller neighbor aimed at invading the country. Deadly airstrikes dropped on civilians' heads across the entire country, and the Russian troops crossed Ukraine's borders from the territory of Russia, Belarus, and the occupied parts of Ukraine's Donbas and Crimea. Does it remind you of something, doesn't it? Indeed. Very clear parallels could be drawn with the beginning of the Second World War, too. And Russia's course of action is very similar to what their spiritual mentors from the Third Reich employed on the Ukrainian land 80 years ago. Just one, the most recent example of human sufferings, example of war crime. As all of us were on our way to the General Assembly today, the Russian army shelled with Grad multiple rocket launcher systems the residential areas of the city of Kharkiv, the second biggest in Ukraine. Innocent civilians have been killed and wounded. The exact numbers is very difficult to estimate because of the warfare, while the negotiations are still underway at the border with Belarus. We therefore express our gratitude for overwhelming support that made this decision on the emergency session possible. We are grateful to the President of the General Assembly for his taking care of this idea well in advance. We appreciate the engagement of the UN Secretary General, who has taken a very strong stance in support of peace, in support of the UN Charter. We have been prompted to call for an emergency special session as the level of the threat to the global security has been equated to that of the Second World War, or even higher, following Putin's order to put and alert Russian nuclear forces. What a madness. If he wants to kill himself, He doesn't need to use nuclear arsenal. He has to do what the guy in Berlin did in a bunker in May 1945. The Security Council addressed the issue of the Russian war against Ukraine, and the decision was not adopted due to the obvious reason. The country attempting to occupy Ukraine since 2014 has occupied the seat of the Council permanent member since 1991. Therefore, we do not accept the Russian logic that the Security Council was unable to act due to one-sided and unbalanced approach. The only guilty party is the Russian Federation. Distinguished delegates, Russia uses all its military potential to attack Ukraine and has begun redeploying reserve units on the border with Ukraine. It fires cruise and ballistic missiles at cities, attacks with aviation, tanks and artillery, sends subversion and reconnaissance groups which mark residential buildings in preparation for the air attacks. Russia's missiles are now aimed at destroying the infrastructure objects. They targeted the radioactive waste disposal site near Kyiv, the fuel base in the town of Vasilkiv that is effectively a Kyiv's suburb. The objects of logistic infrastructure, including bridges, airports, and water reservoirs, remain among the targets. Such towns as Shastya and Stanitsa Luganska near Lugansk are now nearly destroyed, as well as residential buildings in and around Kyiv and Kharkiv. The Russian forces seized the Chernobyl nuclear power station and the part of southern Kherson region, including the North Crimean Canal. Due to the active moving of Russian heavy militaries through the Chernobyl exclusion zone, the radiation level has increased rapidly. In the Black Sea, Russian warships deliberately attacked two civil vessels under the flags of Panama and Moldova, approaching Ukraine. This constitutes a flagrant violation of the international law of the sea. Incredibly, one of the vessels had the Russian crew. Still, it was attacked by the Russians. Russians keep attacking kindergartens and orphanages, thus committing war crimes and violating the Rome Statute. Hospitals and mobile medical aid brigades are also targeted by the Russian shelling and the sabotage groups working in Ukraine's cities and towns. The Russian military fired on ambulance crews in the areas of Zaporizhia and Kyiv. In Akhtirka district of Sumy region, Russian tanks shot down a bus with civilians. Later, the Russian military did not allow ambulances on the spot. As of today, 352 people, including 16 children, were killed on the Ukrainian side, and 2,040 Ukrainians, including 45 children, wounded during the first 5 days of the Russian invasion. And this number is growing non-stop. I have already told about the morning shellings in Kharkiv, and we cannot really estimate at this moment how many were killed. In response, Ukraine has activated its right for self-defense according to the Article 51 of the UN Charter. The Russian troops are suffering losses: aircrafts, helicopters, tanks, trucks, personnel. The aggressor forces have already lost more than 5,000 in manpower during the first days of aggression. Excellencies, the General Assembly should be vocal in demanding from the Russian Federation to stop its offensive against Ukraine. In recognizing Russian actions as an act of aggression against a sovereign and independent state, in demanding from Russia to immediately, completely, and unconditionally withdraw its forces from the territory of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders, in demanding from the Russian Federation to reverse the decision related to the status of certain areas of Donetsk and Lugansk regions of Ukraine, in demanding full compliance with the provisions of international humanitarian law. The General Assembly should also be clear with regard to the treacherous role of Belarus and its involvement in aggression of the Russian Federation against Ukraine. Distinguished members of the General Assembly, what is happening now in Ukraine has already had the security and humanitarian implications for all of you. Immediately for Europe, a bit later for the rest, including in terms of food security, energy security, financial markets, collapse of the economies. Last September, my president said, while delivering his statement at the high-level segment of the 76th session of the General Assembly, and I quote, "I understand that criticism of the UN is often heard, but we criticize ourselves." End of quote. If we fail to respond now, we will face much more than criticism. We will face oblivion. It must not happen. Now it is time to act, time to help Ukraine, that is paying now the ultimate price for freedom and security of itself and of the world. If Ukraine does not survive, international peace will not survive. If Ukraine does not survive, the United Nations will not survive. Have no illusions. If Ukraine does not survive, we cannot be surprised if democracy fails next. Now we can save Ukraine, save the United Nations, save democracy, and defend the values we believe in and that Ukrainians are fighting for and paying with their lives. The Russian delegate will speak shortly. Putin has done everything to delegitimize the Russian presence in the United Nations. But I wonder if the Russian presence in the United Nations has ever been legitimate. I wonder if ever this assembly voted in accordance with paragraph 2 of Article 4 on admission of the Russian Federation to the United Nations, either in December 1991 or in January 1992, or wherever thereafter. I want to ask the delegates whose countries voted for admission of the Russian delegation to the United Nations to raise their hand, to confirm that Russia was admitted to the United Nations according to the Charter. Please, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, please raise your hand if your country voted in the formal session of the General Assembly in reply to the letter by President Yeltsin dated December 24, 1991, when he told the United Nations that Russia would like to be a continuator state of the demised Soviet Union. Anyone? Shall I put my glasses if my vision fails me and I don't see any hand raised? Any country? Anyone voted for Russian membership? I leave you with that and think about it when you listen to the Russian delegate.
I thank the distinguished representative of Ukraine. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Russian Federation.
Господин председатель,
Mr. President,
господин генеральный
Mr.
секретарь,
Secretary General,
уважаемые коллеги,
distinguished colleagues,
в последние дни
in
украинский
recent
сюжет
days,
доминирует в
the Ukrainian
информационном поле и
issue
занимает центральное
has
место в Совете Безопасности
made
ООН и теперь
headlines, global
и на
headlines, and
Генассамблее.
is now been
При
given pride of
этом
place at the UN
действия
Security Council and
России
now the General Assembly. At the same
перевираются и
time,
передергиваются,
Russian actions are being
обрастают огромным
distorted
количеством самых
and
невероятных небылиц и
thwarted.
фейков.
And there is the number of incredible fakes is staggering with the use with media outlets and social networks proliferating these lies. For this reason, today I wish to focus on the real reasons for the crisis that has emerged and its possible consequences. I wish to emphasize the following. The root for the current crisis lies in the actions of Ukraine itself. For many years, it sabotaged and flouted its direct obligations under the Minsk package of measures. Just recently, very recently, there was a hope that in Kiev they would reconsider and that they would indeed comply with what they signed on to back in 2015. For that, first and foremost, what was necessary was direct dialogue, as set out in the document, between Donetsk and Lugansk. However, the latest confirmation from the senior leadership of the country was that Ukraine was unwilling to engage in this dialogue, and they took unwilling to take steps to grant special status to Donbass, and as set out in the Minsk agreements, and this was actively supported by the Western patrons of Kiev, and this definitively persuaded us of the fact that we no longer have a right to allow the residents of Donbass to suffer any further. Insofar as Ukrainian provocations against the people of Donbass in February did not end, in fact, they escalated. The leadership of DPR and LPR turned to us with a request to deliver military support in line with bilateral agreements on cooperation, which were arrived at with their recognition, concurrently with recognition, and this was a logical step to the ongoing, the persistent aggressive actions undertaken by the Ukrainian regime. The Ukrainian authorities, which has of late been actively armed and incited by a number of states, were under the misconception that with the indulgence of Western patrons and sponsors, they would be able to address the issues in Donbass militarily. It is difficult otherwise. It would be difficult to explain the ongoing intensification of shelling and sabotage acts on the territory of the republics which I mentioned. The people of Donbass and Lugansk continue to have to take shelter in basements. There was a flood of refugees entering the Russian Federation, and yet still the nature of the Ukrainian armed forces operation did not change, and yet Western partners did not wish, turned a blind eye to this, and they merely echoed Ukrainian tall tales about the allegations that Donbass people were shelling on themselves. The worsening suffering of the residents of Donbass is something that has left Western sponsors unmoved. In recent years, this discussion at the Security Council General Assembly, there was no empathy whatsoever, no compassion for the people of Donbass and Lugansk. It seems that these 4 million people simply don't exist for them. And as a result, the ongoing threats targeting the people of LPR and DPR, given the lack of prospects for addressing the problems in the area under the Minsk operations due to the failure to fulfill them, the Russian president took a decision for especially military special military operation to be carried out in Donbass. Occupation of Ukraine is not part of these plans. The goal of the special operation is to protect the people who for 8 years were subject to torment and genocide by the Kiev regime. To that end, there's a need to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. We further will strive to hold accountable those who carried out countless brutal crimes against the people, the residents, including residents of the Russian Federation. This decision was taken in line with Article 51 of the United Nations Charter with the sanction of the Federation Council of the Russian Federation. In pursuant of the Agreement on Friendship and Cooperation with DPR and LPR, I wish to recall further that the principle of sovereignty and territorial integrity of states is something which we are being accused of breaching vis-à-vis Ukraine. The Declaration of Principles of International Law on Friendly Relations Between Peoples was adopted in 1970, and it needs to be unstintingly complied with respect to states, I quote, complying in conducting themselves in compliance with the principle of equal rights and self-determination of peoples as described above, and thus possessed of a government representing the whole people, belonging to the territory without distinction as to race, creed, or color. End of quote. Today's government of Ukraine is no such government. Moreover, during the special military operation, Russia has been exercising its right to self-defense from a regime that has been striving to gain access to nuclear weapons. The president of Ukraine explicitly stated this on 18 February during the Munich conference, and I would recall, this statement that he delivered was met with applause by the participants of this conference. At the same time, Ukraine is seeking membership in NATO, where there's Article 5 in effect, and has territorial claims to the Russian Federation. Hence, by leveraging Article 51 of the UN Charter, not only is Russia protecting itself from the nationalist threat, but Russia is also seeking to uphold the purposes and principles of the United Nations Charter on the soil of Donbass and Ukraine, ensuring that the main goal of the United Nations be upheld, namely to prevent succeeding generations from a scourge of war. Unfortunately, it behooves us to note the very negative role played in all of this by Western colleagues led by the United States. Instead of compelling Kiev to comply with its obligations, instead they are merely inciting Kiev, egging it on, repeating the senseless mantra that their obligations and the Minsk agreements are not being complied with the Russian Federation, which I should like to recall and emphasize, the Russian Federation is not a party to it. Moreover, our Western colleagues have shamelessly inundated the country with weapons, have sent to the country instructors, and effectively incited Ukrainians who are facing a 120,000-strong military contingent, prompted them to engage in armed provocation against the Donbass. Thereby, the Western countries have created a bubble that cannot but pop. Distinguished colleagues, discussing today, in this discussion, it behooves us to note that back in 2008, the Russian president at the NATO Bucharest Council cautioned that members of NATO should think 3 times before proudly stating that Ukraine and Georgia will join NATO, and this was portrayed as some kind of a great compromise, which was immediately met with action plans undertaken in Ukraine and Georgia to join the alliance. At the same time, in 2014, there was a brutal anti-constitutional coup which took place in Kiev, as a result of which nationalists and radicals seized power, and their policy was to create an anti-Russia in Ukraine and to ensure that it joined NATO, and I will revisit that. For us, Ukraine joining NATO is a red line, first and foremost from the military strategic level. The deployment of NATO infrastructure in that country would compel us to adopt measures in response, and this has placed us at the verge of conflict. For this reason, in December 2021, we proposed that agreements be arrived at with the U.S. and NATO for security assurances to be provided to the Russian Federation. However, our extended hand was unceremoniously rebuffed by Americans and NATO representatives. It was proposed that we continue to discuss secondary issues without consideration of our concerns. Moreover, the question was not addressed as to how the freedom of choosing alliances as set out in the OSCE aligns with the principles of indivisibility of security, which is of great importance to us. Probably many of you wonder what should be done now and what role can the United Nations play in addressing the Ukrainian crisis. We believe that the UN can and should play its role, help to bring the stakeholders' positions closer together and to eradicate the causes of conflict. The key role here, according to the Charter, should be played by and allies with the Security Council. However, attempts to calmly discuss this issue is something our partners did not deign to undertake. For this reason, the Russian Federation on 25 February voted against the anti-Russian and anti-Ukrainian draft resolution of the Security Council. It is anti-Russian, this document. There's no need to explain why. It suffices to have a cursory glance at the document. Why is it anti-Ukrainian, the document? Because this document, beyond any doubt, is inconsistent with the root interests of the Ukrainian people insofar as it is an attempt to salvage and to cement in Ukraine those authorities who brought the country to the brink of tragedy, and this tragedy has been ongoing for 8 years now. The main reason for our negative vote was not what was in the draft, but what was not included in the draft. If the sponsors were to attempt to make it even remotely balanced, then they would not have left out issues that need to be addressed in the context of the Ukrainian issue. Specifically, what was unaddressed was the way that the unconstitutional coup in Ukraine, in Kiev, in February 2014, resulted in the Maidan junta seizing power and using it against the residents, shelling civilian areas with artillery pieces and multiple rocket launchers, and raining bombs on the people of Donbass and Lugansk. What was unaddressed was how the Ukrainian authorities, with the tolerance and indulgence of Western sponsors, consistently and cynically shirked their obligations to implement the Minsk agreement. At the same time, at the line of contact, Ukrainian death squads, first and foremost comprised of neo-Nazi and radical elements, methodically, day after day, shelled the residential areas of DPR and LPR, killing women, children, the elderly. This is ongoing today. How can we fail to mention the fact that the Ukrainian nationalists have been perpetrating crimes for all these 8 years? The protesters against Maidan and Odessa were burned alive. The peaceful protesters at the Maidan were shot out, killed by snipers. The investigation into these tragedies by the Maidan regime was deliberately swept under the rug. At the same time, the perpetrators in the Odessa tragedy are well known. They are flaunting their presence, and an alternative investigation into the reasons, into the acknowledgement by these snipers unambiguously emphasizes that the slaughter on Independence Square was a provocation by the leaders of Maidan. We specifically last year held an informal Security Council, our informal meeting on this issue in order to provide colleagues at the Security Council with more information about this. However, in response, at best, we heard from Western sponsors merely hackneyed cliches about Russian propaganda. What kind of a text resolution on Ukraine can there be in the above-mentioned circumstances? There's a need to ensure that the text, there was a need for the text to have a frank assessment of the role in inflating the Ukrainian crisis played by Western colleagues who not only were present in the Minsk negotiations, but effectively gave Kiev carte blanche to carry out any actions or steps that would be unthinkable for any civilized states. With tales being spun about the triumph of democracy in Ukraine, the Maidan authorities and nationalists engaged in, with impunity, murdering political opponents, persecuting opposition, shuttering opposition television outlets, where there could be
оружием
relatively
Украине, из
objective
которого
information
потом убивались
provided.
мирные
6 of
жители на
those television
Донбассе.
channels were shuttered under
Ответственность за то, что
Zelensky alone.
происходит
And
сейчас,
how could we
лежит
fail
не
to
только
mention
на
the fact
нынешнем
that
украинском
the
руководстве,
country
но и на
was
наших
flooded with
западных
weapons,
коллегах.
which were then turned on
Уважаемые коллеги,
peaceful civilians in Donbass? The responsibility for what is taking
хотел
place
бы
right now
также привлечь
lies at
ваше
the feet
внимание
of
к
the
тому, что
current
вокруг российской
Ukrainian leadership
специальной
as
военной
well as our
операции
Western colleagues.
нагнетается пузырь лжи, фейков и дезинформации.
Today we wish to
В частности, именно
emphasize that
разрушенные
this has been
вооруженными
inflated by
силами
the lies,
Украины
deceit,
и
misinformation from
националистскими
the
дома на
Ukrainian
Донбассе
armed
западные
forces
СМИ
and the
сейчас чаще
nationalist
всего
Western media
беззастенчиво
outlets
выдают за
increasingly,
последствия нашей военной
shamelessly are
операции
portraying
в Украине.
our military operation
Мы
as a result,
постоянно
as
слышим
a
вранье
negative
и фейки о
consequence. We
неизбирательной
constantly hear
бомбардировке
lies, fakes about
украинских
indiscriminate
городов,
shelling of
больниц, школ и
Ukrainian
детских садов.
cities, hospitals,
Российская
schools,
армия не
kindergartens. The
угрожает
Russian army
мирным жителям
does not
Украины,
pose a
не
threat to the
обстреливает
civilians of
мирные
Ukraine.
объекты.
Is not
Города,
shelling
которые
civilian
перешли под
areas in
контроль
areas and cities
российских
where
вооруженных
Russian
сил,
armed forces have
и
taken
эти города
control,
живут в обычном
and
режиме.
these
Там
areas are
функционируют
seeing
объекты
citizens living
жизнеобеспечения,
their lives
работает транспорт
normally,
и совместно
basic
с
infrastructure,
местной администрацией
transportation,
поддерживают
local
порядок. Это же
infrastructure,
касается
and law
Чернобыльской
and order is
атомной
being upheld.
электростанции,
And this
которая
includes the
совместно патрулируется
electrical
российскими
station, the
вооруженными
power
силами
plant,
и
which is
специальной
jointly patrolled by Russian
полицией,
representatives and the
украинской
special
полицией, которая
Ukrainian
там
police
находится.
who are present in
Чернобыльская
the area. The
также
Chernobyl
функционирует в нормальном
plant is
режиме.
also operating
Угроза сейчас
normally.
для жителей
The
Украины
threat to the
представляют
residents of
украинские
Ukraine presently is
националисты,
posed by the
фактически
Ukrainian
взявшие в
nationalists who have
заложники
effectively
жителей
taken
Украины
hostage the
и
residents of Ukraine,
прикрывающиеся ими как
and
живым
they're
щитом.
using them, they're hiding
Есть
themselves behind them and using them
множество
as human
свидетельств,
shields. There's
распространяемых простыми украинцами,
abundant
о том,
evidence
что
from ordinary
националисты,
Ukrainians that
невзирая на их
nationalists,
протесты,
despite their
размещают
protests,
тяжелую
have
технику
been
и
deploying
системы
heavy
залпового
equipment
огня в
and
жилых
multiple
кварталах.
rocket
Это
launchers in
вопиющее
residential areas.
нарушение
This is an
международного
egregious
гуманитарного
violation of international
права,
humanitarian
которое
law,
должно
which
получить должное
needs to
осуждение.
be
По сути,
duly
это та же
condemned.
тактика, которую
Effectively,
применяет
this is the same
террористы ИГИЛ.
tactic that is being used
Вся
by ISIL
ответственность за
terrorists.
возможные
All of the
последствия
responsibility for
лежит
the
на
possible
Майданном режиме.
repercussions lies at the feet
Жителям
of the
Украины
Maidan regime. The
угрожает
residents
также
of Ukraine are also
бесконтрольная
threatened by
раздача
the
радикалами
unfettered,
власти всем
uncontrolled
желающим,
radical
включая
elements giving to
специально
all those
выпущенным
who
из
wish,
тюрем
including
преступникам,
criminals who have specifically
оружие,
been
которое
released from
уже
prison. They are
стреляет
now
в руках
receiving weapons,
грабителей и
and
мародеров.
the
В
looters and
соцсетях
marauders and criminals
достаточно
are now using them to target
подтверждений
civilians.
этому от
There is
жителей
sufficient
Киева
and abundant
и других
evidence
городов.
of
Это
this from residents
демонстрирует
of Kiev and other cities.
бездумное
This
отношение
demonstrates
украинской власти
the
к своим женщинам.
recklessness of Ukraine
Мы
authorities
получили
vis-à-vis their women.
только что письмо
Just now we
от
received a
Украинской
letter from
правозащитной
the
общественной
Ukrainian
организации
human rights
Институт правовой
civic
политики и
organization,
социальной
the
защиты
Social
имени
Policy
Ирины
and Social
Бережной,
Protection
которая
Institute
на протяжении
under the name
8
of
лет
Irina Berezhnoy. For
информирует
8
международные
years, this
структуры
body has been
о том,
informing
как
international
зарождался и
structures
прочно
about
укрепился
how
неонацизм
the
на
neo-Nazism
Украине и
was
как он
born and
поддерживался и
proliferated
поддерживается
in
на
Ukraine, and
государственном
how it
уровне.
has been and continues to be held
Краткая цитата.
at the state level. I briefly
Сегодня
quote, today,
апогей беспредела
the
неонацистов
apogee
в
of
Украине
the
по
recklessness and
распоряжению
lawlessness
власти
of
из
neo-Nazis in
тюрем
Ukraine
выпустили
was
осужденных,
that condemned
совершивших
criminals have been
тяжкие
released from
преступления, убийства,
prison. They have
грабежи,
carried out
насилие.
grave
Только в
crimes,
Киеве всем
murders,
желающим
etc.
без
Only in
каких-либо
Kiev,
документов
those
раздали
who
25
are
тысяч автоматов.
willing receive 25,000
Начались
machine
убийства,
guns
грабежи,
without any
мародерство.
documentation.
Так называемые
Killings,
представители
looting,
территориальной
crime
обороны
is
Киева
ongoing. Those
вчера
so-called
цинично
territorial
расстреляли
defenders of
машину
of
семьи
Ukraine
Кудрина с тремя детьми. Родители и
shot at
одна
a car,
девочка
killing
скончались сразу.
killing
Двоих
parents and a
детей в
girl.
больнице.
A young girl,
Двое детей в
2
больнице в
children
тяжелом состоянии.
are in hospital,
Бывший исполняющий
critically
обязанности
wounded. The
президента
former
после
acting
неконституционного
president,
перехода власти
following
в
the
феврале
unconstitutional
2014
coup in
года,
February of 2014,
Турчинов призвал всех
Turchinov called
неравнодушных
on
граждан
all
резать
citizens who are
русню.
not indifferent
То есть
to
убивать русских по всей территории
slaughter
страны.
Russians
Это при том,
throughout
что
the territory of the country.
последняя перепись на
And
Украине
this, despite the fact
2019
that
года
the most
установила,
recent
что в Украине
document for Ukraine in 2019 sets out that 16, almost 17%, and actually far more
Сейчас
people are Russian
против
there.
России
Now,
в
against the
соцсетях
Russian
развязана
Federation in social
информационная
networks,
война.
an information war
Поскольку
has been
свидетельств
unleashed
разрушения
insofar as evidence
гражданской
of destruction of
инфраструктуры
civilian
российскими
infrastructure
военными нет, за таковые
by
выдаются
Russian military
украинские
does not
удары и
exist.
ошибочные
Ukrainian
попадания, а также кадры и
attacks
видеоролики из
and
Донбасса,
accidental
фиксирующие как раз преступления
attacks
украинских националистов.
bear out the
того,
fact that Ukrainian
в сетях,
nationalists are carrying
соцсетях
out this
размещены
violence.
целые
Social networks
обучающие пособия о
have
том, как снять
training
фейки,
manuals about
порочащие
how
нашу
to
военную
create create fakes to taint our military operation. Throughout Ukrainian social networks, there are 1.2 million such pieces of fake news, and the correspondence that was read out by the Ukrainian ambassador, that conversation that was read out is also part of these facts and these fakes. This is well known. We also did not support the draft resolution for this issue to move from the Security Council and be addressed by the General Assembly special session today. We were guided by the fact that this measure proposes that we register that the Security Council failed to comply to uphold its main responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security. And at the same time, there was not even a hint at an attempt to find a constructive solution at the Security Council, attempts to circumvent the position of the Russian Federation, to disregard the position of the Russian Federation, runs counter to the very bedrock of the United Nations. There's a need to find common ground, regardless of our Western partners' attempts to avoid this, including when they disregarded our legitimate concerns in connection with NATO policy and Western countries' breach of the core principles of the OSCE on indivisibility of security. To conclude, Mr. President, I wish to state that the Russian Federation did not begin these hostilities. The hostilities were unleashed by Ukraine against its own residents, the residents of Donbass, and all of those who are dissenters. Russia is seeking to end this war. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Russian Federation. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the European Union.
Mr. President, I have the honor to speak on behalf of the European Union and its member states. North Macedonia, Montenegro, Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Iceland, Norway, Republic of Moldova, Georgia, San Marino, Andorra, Monaco and Liechtenstein align themselves with this statement. Mr. President, I want to thank you for convening us here today and for the Secretary General to be here and for all of you colleagues being here. It's very important that the facts are heard and fully understood, and that this body is able to take the appropriate decisions after the fact that the Security Council, thanks to the veto by one country alone, stopped the Council from taking that decision. Let me start by expressing the European Union's full solidarity and support to Ukraine and its people, who are courageously fighting an unprovoked and unjustified military aggression from Russia. Since our meeting here in the General Assembly last week, the situation has dramatically escalated, despite tireless diplomatic efforts, including at the highest level. Russia has decided to turn its back to peace, to the rules-based international order as defined inter alia in the UN Charter, to diplomacy and to the international community. Russia's military attack against Ukraine has already caused an alarming number of deaths, injured, internally displaced and refugees. We condemn in the strongest possible terms the unprovoked invasion of Ukraine by armed forces of the Russian Federation in violation of Ukraine's independence, sovereignty and territorial integrity. We also condemn the involvement of Belarus in this aggression against Ukraine, and we call on both Russia and Belarus to abide by their international obligations. We're also alarmed by Russia's raising of the nuclear alert level. We call on Russia to de-escalate and to immediately return to the previous alert level of its nuclear arsenal and to avoid any actions that could risk the safety or security of the nuclear power plants in Ukraine, a non-nuclear weapon state under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Russia bears full responsibility for this aggression and the resulting destruction and loss of life. We demand from Russia to cease cease its military operations immediately and unconditionally, and to withdraw all forces and military equipment from the entire territory of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders. We further call on Russia to engage in earnest in dialogue with a view to a political and diplomatic solution. Russia's actions grossly violate international law and are in clear breach of the UN Charter and the OSCE Helsinki Final Act, as well as Russia's specific commitments to respect Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity under the Budapest Memorandum of 1994. This is arguably the biggest aggression in Europe since the end of the Second World War. It follows similar Russian aggression against its neighbors in 2008 and 2014. We underscore our firm support for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Georgia and of the Republic of Moldova, and we are closely monitoring the situation in the region. This Assembly has a responsibility immediately and effectively to acknowledge and address Russia's actions. Failing to do so will erode trust to the rules-based global order with the UN at its core and the UN Charter itself. It would send the wrong message to perpetrators of such aggression and aggravate similar risks to other UN member states in the region and beyond. We stand firmly by Ukraine and its people. We deplore the loss of life and human suffering. This is a dire humanitarian catastrophe, and humanitarian needs are rapidly increasing. With the toll of IDPs and refugees rising, humanitarian support is a priority in the wider package of EU support offered to Ukraine in these trying days. The EU and its member states are providing urgently needed humanitarian assistance to the Ukrainian population. Ukraine has activated the Union's civil protection mechanism and is receiving urgently needed supplies from EU member states. In addition, the Republic of Moldova, to which more than 60,000 Ukrainians have fled, has requested and received EU humanitarian support in dealing with the human catastrophe caused deliberately by the Russian Federation's invasion of Ukraine. We call on Russia and Russia-backed armed formations to respect international law, including international humanitarian law. Civilians and civilian infrastructures must be protected and humanitarian access should be secured. We call on Russia and Russia-backed armed formations to allow safe and unhindered humanitarian access and stop their disinformation campaign and cyber attacks. We strongly condemn the involvement of Belarus in this aggression against Ukraine and call on it to immediately stop action and to abide by its international obligations. We recall our unwavering support for the independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders, and we call on all UN members not to recognize the two self-proclaimed separatist entities. The EU has reacted swiftly and decisively to Russia's recognition of Ukraine's self-proclaimed separatist entities and the invasion of Ukraine. By adopting restrictive measures, we intend to take such measures against Belarus. Mr. President, let us be clear on this. We firmly believe that the use of force and coercion to change borders has no place in the 21st century. Let us recall that the UN Charter prohibits both the threat and the use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state, or in any other manner inconsistent with the purposes of the United Nations. Tensions and conflict should be resolved through dialogue and diplomacy. The EU, together with like-minded partners, have been united in making unprecedented efforts to achieve a diplomatic solution. But Russia has not reciprocated these efforts and instead opted unilaterally for a grave and premeditated escalation. With this one-sided step, Russia is further isolating itself. We are today at a crucial and historical moment. Too many times in the past, the international community has been blind or too slow in front of unfolding tragedies. Entire generations in many places around the world, many of you representing them, have paid and are still paying the price of inaction. We cannot make the same mistake again. We have to take action. After Russia's veto in the Security Council last week, the General Assembly has the responsibility to send a strong and united message on the need for Russia to immediately and unconditionally cease its military operations, withdraw its troops, and opt for genuine dialogue. We call on Russia to avoid, in particular, any action that places the safety and security of Ukraine's nuclear and radioactive waste installations at risk. The people of Ukraine and the whole world are watching us and counting on us, and will judge us on the decisions that we will take here in this special emergency session. And it's our duty and responsibility for all of us to do our utmost to defend the UN Charter and the international order. We therefore hope that this Assembly will massively support the resolution tabled by Ukraine and its partners. The EU and its member states will continue to do their utmost to protect the integrity of the rules-based international system, which is key to our collective security, and we call on all UN member states to do the same. On our side, we will continue to stand by Ukraine, support its democratically elected institutions and representatives and its people, including through additional political, financial, humanitarian and logistical support. I thank you very much, colleagues. I thank you very much, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of the European Union.
Live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the primary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the